I think we're going to move on to Katherine Gilroy now. Katherine is a senior associate at Cedars, a leading private investment platform and the most active funder of private companies in the UK, more commonly known as crowdfunding. Katherine sources businesses for the Cedars investor audience. She advises entrepreneurs on how to strategize around their investment rounds and to raise capital, market their business, and build a community of brand ambassadors. As diversity lead, she also advocates for underrepresented founders and works to ensure the platform supports as many founders from underrepresented backgrounds as possible, which is super important. To date, she's helped over 40 seed stage businesses to raise over £17.5 million. So Katherine, if you would be kind enough to unmute and turn on your video, and we'd love to hear from you for about 10 minutes or so. So thank you for joining us.
Thanks, and thanks everyone for having me here today. As Jo just said, my name is Katherine. I'm a senior associate at Cedars, and today I'm going to be talking about the power of the crowd. And I'm going to basically walk you through who Cedars are, what we do, and why that's particularly relevant for FemTech businesses. And I'm hopefully be able to bring that to life a little bit for you as well. For those who might not be so familiar with Cedars, we are a marketplace for investing in high growth startups and scale ups. We work with some of the businesses that you will have heard of, like Revolut, as well as those that some that you may not have heard of yet. We can work with almost any kind of business in the UK and the EU, but we really love working with mission-led businesses that are scaling at pace and crucially that have a brilliant story to tell. And the aim with a crowdfunding campaign, if you've not come across it before, is typically to raise as much money as possible from as many people as possible. We've actually worked with a number of FemTech businesses to date, which is great. We've got a couple that are currently live on the platform at the moment. Do go check them out. Remember that capital is at risk if you go and take a look at them. But just for some context, so Cedars was created with the aim of democratizing private investment. So prior to platforms like ours, the investment world was, and in some cases still is, pretty opaque. And it was all about who you know, not necessarily what you know. And so if you were a startup looking to raise investment, it was pretty impossible to do that unless you operated in certain circles or you were from a certain demographic. And then on the flip side of that, if you were an investor or you were looking to invest in early stage startups, again, you couldn't get access to those deals unless you were in those circles. So what we typically had was usually men of a certain demographic investing in other men from the same demographic, which was a problem for anyone that didn't fit into that group. And so the platform was created with the aim of bringing down some of these barriers, and opening up this asset class was really important for the startup ecosystem generally, but particularly for founders who were running businesses like FemTech businesses. And that's because, as we've touched on a little bit already, investors typically invest in what they know and what they understand and in things that they can resonate with, things that they've experienced themselves. And I'm sure we're going to hear that today as a common theme when it comes to some of the challenges that FemTech businesses face. But that's why we were created. And as you can see, it's going pretty well so far. We've had over 1.5 billion invested into campaigns so far, and we've worked with businesses from 21 different European countries, which is brilliant. And that success has resulted in this number. We actually think it's slightly higher than this now. This is a statistic that was produced back in 2019, I think. But 1 in 3 seed stage companies choose crowdfunding as a way to raise investment. We actually work with businesses from seed all the way through to kind of Series C, Series D. But the reason that this statistic is relevant for today's topic is because the FemTech industry has only really started to gain traction in the past couple of years. Meaning that lots of the businesses that are in this space that are thinking about raising money to help them to start scaling are typically at that seed stage. And so I guess the point with this is that if you are a FemTech business and you're thinking about raising funds, crowdfunding should at least be on your radar, because it's a really popular way of raising money for businesses at that early stage. And this is typically why businesses will use crowdfunding, again, for anyone who hasn't considered this as a route before. And I'll walk you through these really quickly. So the first one is the money. That's hopefully relatively obvious. As I just said before, it's a way of accessing capital that you might not otherwise have access to. And in my role, what I think one of the most common things that entrepreneurs say to me is that they don't know any investors. And I'm constantly saying to people that at least when it comes to crowdfunding, you need to unthink anything that you think you know about who an investor is. Because with a crowdfunding platform, you're looking at minimum investment levels of £10 or €10. So actually anybody who knows and loves your brand, or you and the rest of the founding team, and wants to support you and has at least £10 in it to be able to do that, can be an investor in your business. You obviously need an awful lot of £10 investors in order to get to your fundraising target, but it's really important that you can access absolutely any kind of investor. The next one is validation. If you run a crowdfunding campaign and you get hundreds, or in some cases thousands, of individual people who have voted with their wallet to back and support your business, then what better validation of what you're trying to do is there than that, particularly if you are at that seed stage, if you're at that early stage in your business's journey. The next piece of the puzzle is community engagement. This is a really important part of crowdfunding. If you're able to take your users, your customers, your social media followers, the people you've got on your waiting list, the people who are really interested in what you're building, and give them the opportunity to actually be part of the journey with you, by owning a piece of your business, however big or however small, then you'll get a ton of value out of those people. They will typically buy from you more, they'll use you more, they'll become much stickier customers, and they'll hopefully also recommend you, they'll talk about you, and they'll become real brand advocates for the business, because ultimately they have the chance to share in your success. So it's really about cementing their loyalty to your brand. On the flip side of that, crowdfunding is a marketing exercise in itself. So as well as engaging the people who already know about what you're doing, it's a really brilliant platform to put your business in front of hundreds of thousands of new people who might never have heard of you before, so that you can tell your story, you can do that education piece, and you can really get the message out there. And hopefully a lot of those people will invest in your business, but also become customers, brand advocates, recommenders, and so on. And so you essentially engage your community and then build it out through a crowdfunding campaign. And then the last reason is speed. You can typically run a crowdfunding campaign in 3 to 4 months, versus other traditional routes of funding, which take a little bit longer. What does this mean for FemTech? What I thought I'd run you through is what makes a business suitable for the crowd, and hopefully you'll see why I think this makes it particularly relevant for FemTech businesses. This is kind of what I look for when I'm considering startups that I think might want to raise for us. So I'm looking for impact-driven businesses. We want startups that are mission-led. Our investors are investing with both their head and their heart. They hopefully want to make a return on their money, but they also want to feel good about where they're putting their money. And I haven't come across a single FemTech business so far that isn't impact-driven. The second one is we predominantly work with consumer brands. Crowdfunding works best for B2C brands because you have a customer base that you can engage, but as I just mentioned, also that any new investors can also be customers and brand advocates. So it's a good customer acquisition piece in itself. We also want business propositions that your average everyday person can understand. If our retail investors can relate to your proposition and could see themselves or someone they know as customers, then they're more likely to invest. We want businesses with community at the core, so businesses who can get value out of the crowd. Lots of FemTech businesses actually have community built into their businesses because they are tackling really sensitive issues, and so part of their offering is quite often it's support and it's that community element. So what a brilliant way to then use that community and really solidify it. The next thing is we're looking for emerging sectors. All startup investors want to invest in the next big thing. The FemTech industry has been around for a little while now, but as I said before, it's just in the past couple of years that it's really started gaining traction and momentum. And then the last thing is we're looking for rapidly growing markets. If investors know that they're getting into a space early, but it's a space that's really taking off, and then that makes it super exciting. I found this, you see this kind of various different numbers that are thrown around in terms of the size of the potential opportunity or the potential market of the FemTech industry. This is the biggest one I think that I found that was put together by FemTech Focus. $1.186 trillion is the estimated global value of the FemTech industry. That's enormous, and that makes it really, really exciting for investors. And so I wanted to talk you through a little bit about why crowdfunding is different to some of the other routes to investment out there, and why it should be relevant for FemTech businesses. And the first one is that you have an opportunity to speak to a more gender diverse investor base. As you can see here, we've got about a third of our investor audience is female, which is not where we would like it to be, but it's going in the right direction. And actually, if you look at that versus other traditional investing options, there are reports out there that say that only about 13% of VC partners are female, only about 14% of angel investors. I think both of those numbers are also going up, but it's a pretty low bar to start with. So if you can talk to an audience that is likely to understand and resonate with your proposition more than other investors might do, then that can be a really interesting option for you. The next thing is that it's a really accessible way of investing. I mentioned before that investors can invest from as little as £10. And effectively what you're doing then is widening the pool of investors who can invest in your business. And that includes being able to engage the entrepreneur's own personal and professional network. So people who want to support those founders who understand that the journey that they're on. And it's a way to then be able to pull more people and get more diversity on your cap table. And the last thing is that it's a way to access support that perhaps isn't available with some other investors. We, for example, as a platform, have signed up to the Investing in Women Code. That means that we're actively baking it into our business strategy to ensure that we increase diversity in our portfolio. We do that through support that we offer, and we do it through partnerships. And it's it's just a way to make sure that we're putting the money in the right places. And so hopefully you're now thinking about raising through crowdfunding. If you are, and if you only take one thing away from my presentation, it's this slide. This is kind of very basic equation as to how to run a crowdfunding campaign, and the strategy within this will be different from business to business. But effectively, a crowdfunding campaign is made up of your private network. So that can be friends, family, professional contacts. It can be angel investors, VCs, funds, family offices. Basically, your first level of investors who are going to come in and anchor your round. The second phase is your business community. This is your customers, your users, your social medias, people who are already following the brand. And then the third pot of investment are the platform investors. And I wanted to just kind of walk you through a really quick case study to bring this to life a little bit. This is a business that I worked with last year. It's a business called Sisters, which is a FemTech that currently focuses on menstrual health, but I know they have ambitions to do much more. They raised funds with us in November last year to start scaling their business to the next level. They raised 663,000 from just over 400 investors, had a really, really successful round with us. The aim for their campaign was obviously to raise the capital that they needed, but also they wanted to engage their existing community and then build out their tribe as well. And here's essentially how they did it. With their anchor investments, that first piece of the puzzle that I just mentioned, their existing investors and then some key angels came in to anchor that round. Then looking at their community, we did a couple of things to essentially engage them and bring them in and make this as accessible as possible. So they had quite an engaged audience across their social media, for example. So we ran an Instagram Live with them to essentially educate their audience about crowdfunding and helped their customers to realize that this was actually open to them, so that their customers weren't counting themselves out, helping people to understand what investment was, what it meant, and how they could get involved, and also what the risks were. They baked in some interesting investor perks into their campaign, so that depending on what level you invested, Sisters would donate some products to charity on your behalf. You would access discounts or potentially free products, and they gave early access to new product development as a way to reward their community who were already following them, as an additional little perk on top of their investment. And then it then came to the seeders audience. And what we ran here was a sustainability focused messaging. They used their campaign almost as an education piece. There were a lot of penny drop moments throughout their campaign with investors who were saying, we had no idea what was in the period products that we were using before until we watched your campaign video, and we understood that there were chemicals and other things in there that we hadn't even thought about. And so it was a really, really brilliant way for them to get their story out and to push that out. We did some kind of product reviews within the teams that we shouted out across social media. And then we ran webinars with them, and also did them jointly with other female focused communities that we had partnerships with. And the reason we did that was to get the business in front of more people that we knew the proposition would resonate with. And as you can see, it was super successful and it worked really, really well. And so that's my whistle-stop tour of crowdfunding for FemTech businesses. If you're a FemTech and you're thinking about raising funds, essentially, if you've got a community to engage and you want to access a more diverse investor base, then crowdfunding is at the very least something that you should be thinking about.
Thank you so much. Is there any organisations or startups for which you would think this wasn't a suitable route, or is it pretty much universally accessible and advisable?
I think if you're at a very, very early stage of your business, it's potentially not the right route unless you have a really good personal network that you effectively want to pool together and syndicate through the platform. Likewise, if you're a B2B business, sometimes they can struggle with crowdfunding because they tend to have less of a community. And I guess you don't get that thing where new investors say, oh, I could see myself using this product, or somebody I know could see myself using this product. And then I guess also on that side of things, if your business proposition is very complex. So for example, if you have a deep tech proposition, for example, and again, if you think of your average everyday person on the street, if they wouldn't necessarily understand what you're doing very quickly, then it might not connect with some of the retail investors on the platform.
Great, thank you. And we have quite a few attendees, I believe, from around the globe attending tonight. Can they raise via your platform, or do they have to be UK based? How does that work?
So it's UK and EU on our platform. But yeah, anyone from any of those countries should be able to give it a go.
Good to know. All right, thank you so much. We'll have you back later for the panel discussion. Thanks. Turn your screen off.